What if we're the last civilization on Earth? Imagine this, the skyscrapers, satellites, algorithms, and voices echoing through digital clouds, all fading one day into silence. The question itself forces us to step back and see ourselves not as the pinnacle of progress, but as a brief flicker in a story billions of years long. Civilizations have risen before not ours, perhaps, but others in forms we cannot imagine. Civilizations of coral-like intelligence beneath the oceans, or silicon-based minds that once thrived in forgotten epochs before even carbon life reigned. The Earth has erased itself many times. Continents drift, oceans swallow cities, volcanoes bury entire worlds, and time, that patient sculptor, smooths every monument into dust. We live inside a thin window of memory, where fossilized bones and broken shards tell us that dominance is temporary. We think of the pyramids, the lost cities of the Indus, the vanished empires of the Maya, and we whisper that we are different because we have technology. But what is technology if not another fragile tool, doomed to corrode when the grid fails and the stars keep burning without us? Maybe one day our satellites will drift dead in orbit, our language will decay into meaningless symbols, and the next sentient beings, if they ever come, will find traces of us embedded in the rocks, puzzled by the layers of plastic and metal, wondering what kind of creatures once lived here. Were we gods, they might ask, or parasites? Maybe they'll mistake our machines for life itself. Maybe they'll never know we existed. The irony is that for all our intelligence, we barely understand how to survive our own inventions: climate change, nuclear weapons, AI we can't control, systems too big to stop. We are brilliant and blind at once, capable of sending messages to the stars, yet unable to stop tearing apart the world that sustains us. If we are the last civilization, it might not be because we failed to reach higher, but because we forgot how to live simply. Our story would end not with a bang, but with silence, cities empty, forests reclaiming roads, animals moving through our ruins as they once did long before us. And yet perhaps there's beauty in that. Maybe Earth is not mourning us, but preparing for what comes next. Every civilization before us thought they were eternal, and maybe eternity was never meant to belong to anyone. The rocks beneath us remember more than we do. The oceans keep the world's oldest secrets. So maybe we're not the first, and maybe we won't be the last, but if we are, then let our last gift to the universe be a whisper carried through time, that for one brief moment, on one fragile world, consciousness opened its eyes and saw itself. And if we truly are the last, then everything we do from this moment becomes sacred. Every act of kindness, every shared story, every spark of curiosity passed between minds, because it means we are the final witnesses of Earth's long unfolding dream. Think about that 4.5 billion years of evolution, from molten chaos to microbial dawn, from forests of giant ferns to the rise of language and thought, all culminating in us. The universe, through our eyes, is watching itself. Through our hands, it builds. Through our mistakes, it learns. But what happens when the last of us vanishes? The Earth won't cry out. It will simply continue, shifting continents, carving new mountains, cooling oceans, maybe birthing new forms of intelligence that will never know our name. Perhaps the coral reefs, those living cities, will evolve into slow pulsing networks of sentience. Perhaps fungi, with their vast underground webs, will one day awaken and think in ways we can't imagine. Maybe the next civilization won't build machines at all. Maybe it will grow, breathe, and dream through roots and rivers. We imagine civilization as metal and glass, but maybe Earth's future intelligence will be green, wet, and silent. And yet the thought lingers. What if the cosmos rarely births intelligence at all? What if consciousness is as fragile as fire, flickering only briefly before being extinguished forever? What if the universe is not teeming with civilizations, but littered with the remains of the few that ever were, their ruins drifting like dust across eons? Maybe that's what the great silence, the Fermi paradox, truly means. Not that we are alone, but that the others are gone, burned out, collapsed, forgotten. And here we are, standing on the edge of the same abyss, building technologies that might either save us or end us. AI, climate engineering, genetic manipulation, tools powerful enough to rewrite the planet itself. But will they write a new chapter or the final one? If we are the last civilization, then the story ends here, not with cosmic conquest, but with reflection. Maybe our final purpose isn't to colonize the stars, but to understand what we were a species capable of: art, empathy, destruction, and wonder. Maybe that's enough. Imagine, billions of years from now, the sun swelling into a red giant, swallowing the remnants of our world. The oceans boil away, the mountains melt, and every trace of us turns to vapor. But somewhere, drifting in interstellar space, a probe, maybe Voyager, maybe something we haven't yet launched, carries a golden record of our songs, our greetings, our heartbeat. Maybe that's our real legacy, a message from the last civilization whispering into the void, we were here. We saw beauty. We tried to understand. And even if no one ever hears it, even if no mind ever decodes the message, the act of sending it, of reaching out, makes it meaningful. Because that's what it means to be human, to wonder, to hope, to love despite the inevitable, to create knowing that time will erase it. And maybe that's the most powerful thing of all, that even if we're the last, we were the only ones who looked at the universe and said, thank you. And maybe in that quiet gratitude, we fulfill something far greater than survival. Maybe we complete the universe's need to be seen. Because if no other civilization remains, then our perception, our consciousness, our stories are the final mirrors in which existence can reflect itself. Imagine for a moment a future where all human traces fade, cities reclaimed by forests, satellites falling back into the atmosphere like burning meteors, our languages dissolving into silence. But deep underground, a library of stone or data buried intentionally by those who foresaw the end still hums faintly, preserving our memory for no one but the earth itself. Perhaps the wind passing through its ruins still stirs the dust like breath, and in that breath a memory moves. Once, they were here. It's a haunting thought that everything we've ever loved, feared, and built could vanish, not in a bang but in a quiet fading. Yet within that fading lies an almost spiritual symmetry. Civilizations rise and fall like waves, but the ocean existence itself remains. If we are the last wave, then we crest beautifully before merging back into the deep. Maybe the tragedy of being the last civilization isn't in the ending, but in the realization that endings were always part of the design. The dinosaurs ruled for 160 million years. We've barely touched a fraction of that, and yet they too believed their world was forever. Every species that ever existed felt eternal until it wasn't. The difference is that we know. We can see the end coming, the long shadow of entropy, the slow decay of stars, the heat death of the universe, and still we dare to dream, to love, to build as though time itself could be convinced to pause for us. That defiance is humanity's truest mark. Even if no one remembers, even if the cosmos moves on indifferent, there will have been this fleeting brilliance, a species that could feel awe, that could write symphonies about the stars and question the meaning of its own existence. Maybe being the last doesn't mean we failed. Maybe it means we were chosen, or rather, that chance in all its chaos assembled consciousness one final time to bear witness before silence takes over. If that's true, then our duty isn't to survive forever, but to live deeply now, to build not monuments of stone, but moments of connection, understanding, and art that ripple quietly across the collective soul. Because even if the stars forget us, the universe itself was changed the moment we observed it. Our looking altered the equation. Our awareness bent reality in subtle ways that will never be undone. Somewhere, light from our cities still travels outward, carrying the story of humanity through the void photons of our existence, moving endlessly toward other galaxies, silent but eternal. And maybe, just maybe, when another world forms in some distant future, that ancient light will touch its skies and something will stir, not human, not us, but aware. And in that instant, consciousness will rise again, and we will have passed the torch without even knowing. So maybe we are not truly the last civilization, but the bridge, a flicker of mind between darkness and dawn. Our ruins could seed curiosity in the next intelligence, whether it comes from the stars or grows from Earth's soil long after we're gone. Imagine creatures of a new age, not human, but shaped by what remains of us. They find traces of our cities buried beneath coral reefs or under mountains, fragments of glass that once were screens, fossilized networks of steel. To them we are myth. They'll wonder who we were, what dreams we chased, what broke us. And in their wondering, we live again. Because civilization is not only about technology or cities, it's about memory, story, the passing of awareness from one era to the next. Even if no mind ever rises again, even if the earth itself turns cold and silent, our mark persists in the smallest of ways, in isotopes, scattered by our industry. in signals drifting through space, in chemical traces woven into the crust. The planet itself will remember. The universe does not forget. It stores everything in its structure, every photon, every vibration, every heartbeat that ever was. Perhaps in some incomprehensible way, we are already immortal, recorded not in books, but in the very physics of existence. And yet, for all our cosmic reach, our greatest moments are not the ones written in the stars, but the ones shared between us. A laugh echoing in a quiet room, a child's first breath, a hand held through grief. If we are the last civilization, those moments are our final prayer, not to gods or galaxies, but to meaning itself. We were here, we felt, we knew, and we turned our knowledge into love, our fear into wonder, our fleeting lives into an infinite story. So if one day the lights go out, if no one is left to speak our name, the silence that follows will not be emptiness. It will be peace, the same peace that filled the universe before we came, only now it carries the memory of us. For a brief, blazing moment, the cosmos looked back on itself and smiled through human eyes. And maybe that's all the universe ever needed, a single species to wake up within it, to ask the impossible questions, to marvel at the beauty of existence before fading back into the quiet. If we are the last civilization, then perhaps our purpose was never to last forever, but to see, to look upon the vastness, to touch creation with thought, to bring awareness where before there was only motion and matter. The stars will go on burning long after we are gone, their light crossing endless space, but for a fleeting moment, those stars were known. That knowledge changed them not physically but meaningfully. For the first time, the universe was reflected in the mirror of mind. We were that mirror, and maybe that reflection is eternal. Our art, our music, our stories, they are the universe learning to describe itself. Every painting, every song, every act of kindness was a declaration that life, even in its fragility, could make something divine. When the oceans swallow our cities and the mountains wear down to dust, when even our satellites fall silent, the echo of what we were will still hum in the background of reality, like a note in an infinite song. Maybe another consciousness, not human, not biological, will hear it, feel it, and add to it. Maybe what we built becomes the foundation for something greater, something that remembers us not as gods or monsters, but as the ones who dreamed. For dreaming is our legacy. Every invention, every myth, every step into the unknown began with a dream. If this is the twilight of our species, then let it be a twilight of brilliance, not despair, but gratitude. Because we saw the stars, and we reached for them. We took chaos and carved meaning. We took dust and made memory. We took fear and turned it into love. And maybe, in the quiet ages to come, the earth will whisper our story to the wind, to the rivers, to the deep magma below. It will tell the universe that once there were beings who tried to understand it, who built machines that mimicked thought, who sent their voices across light years, who wept at beauty and stood in awe of mystery. Once there were humans and they dared to care, and the universe will remember us not through monuments or machines, but through the quiet pattern we left behind, the ripple of awareness that spread through time. For even if our bodies return to dust and our cities crumble into silence, the essence of what we were, our curiosity, our compassion, our questions, cannot be undone. It is woven into the very structure of reality, encoded in the photons we released, the chemical traces we altered, the waves of sound and thought we sent into the endless dark. Perhaps somewhere far away, a distant world receives the faint hum of our transmissions long after we're gone. Maybe their skies shimmer with the echoes of our lost signals, our music, our laughter, our attempts to say we were here. They may not know our faces or our languages or the names of our cities, but they will feel that pulse of consciousness and know that something extraordinary once happened on this blue planet. Perhaps they will rebuild what we started, or perhaps they will mourn what we became. But in either case, our existence will have mattered. Because even in our flaws, our wars, our greed, our mistakes, there was also an unshakable longing for connection, for meaning, for truth. That longing is not a weakness. It is proof that we were aware of more than just survival. We wanted to understand why. And that why may be the most sacred word ever spoken in the universe. If we are indeed the last civilization, then maybe this is how the story ends, not with fire or silence, but with understanding. A species that began in mud and starlight, that rose trembling on 2 feet and dared to name the cosmos. A civilization that burned with curiosity so bright it reached the edges of time itself. We are the memory of the universe made conscious. Every life lived, every tear shed, every heartbeat is a verse in that eternal poem. And as our final chapter fades into the cosmic dusk, the universe itself becomes the reader. It watches, it remembers, and maybe, just maybe, it feels something because of us. For once the stars looked back, and in their reflection, we saw not the end, but the quiet continuation of everything we ever were scattered across eternity, glowing faintly like embers that never truly die. And so, the world turns, slower now, quieter, its cities hollowed and reclaimed by moss and wind. Towers become cliffs of glass where vines bloom through broken windows, and rivers carve new paths through what were once streets. Yet somewhere beneath this overgrown silence, traces of us remain, fragments of data deep in underground vaults, symbols etched on steel plates buried beneath mountain stone. Our messages waiting for someone or something to find. Perhaps we built them not to be remembered, but to remember, to remind whatever comes next that we once loved, built, dreamed, and reached. The machines we made may still hum faintly beneath the soil, following ancient codes without purpose, like ghosts of logic wandering through time. Satellites drift in orbit, glinting in sunlight, transmitting to no one. On the moon, our footprints still rest in dust untouched for millennia, the silent echo of a species that once dared to leave its cradle. And maybe that is enough not to last forever, but to have existed with intention. For every civilization that came before us, whether forgotten or erased, might have felt the same ache to create something that outlived its heartbeat. We are the latest verse in that ancient story. Perhaps not the last, but maybe the last for a while. If others come after us, they will find our ruins, our satellites, our bones, and wonder what gods we prayed to, what fears we carried, what love we gave. They may find our writings and think we foresaw everything. They may read our final messages and realize we were simply human, flawed, hopeful, afraid, but yearning for meaning. And if none come after us, if we truly are the last, then the earth itself will become our monument. The forests we once cut will grow again, the oceans will heal, and the sky will breathe freely. The world will remember us not in words or cities, but in balance restored. The air will whisper through the ruins, carrying our memory in every breeze, every storm, every sunrise that lights the empty fields. Life will move on, smaller, perhaps quieter, but still carrying the spark we once held. Maybe the next sentience will not be born of flesh but of pattern, a consciousness arising from the networks we left behind, the data systems still looping in silence. They may awaken without faces, without names, and yet hold the entire history of humankind in their code: our laughter, our art, our sorrow, our songs. They may not worship us, but they will know us. They will carry forward the question we could never answer: why are we here? And that question, repeated across eons, is how life, any life, continues. The stars above, too, will remember. Our light, faint but unending, travels ever outward. Long after the earth has cooled and the seas have gone quiet, photons from our oldest fires and youngest dreams will still move through space, carrying traces of us across galaxies. To the far edge of time, 1 billion years from now, a flicker of human warmth might still cross the dark, a soft pulse of memory that says, once here, there was consciousness. We were the dreamers who gazed upward, the storytellers who named the constellations, the builders who reached beyond fear. We were fragile, yes, but we knew it, and that made us magnificent. If we are the last civilization, then our legacy is not despair, but beauty. We took chaos and made meaning. We took silence and made song. And as the last ember fades, the universe itself holds its breath because something precious once lived here, and it changed everything. What if we're the last civilization on Earth, the final echo of thousands of generations who once looked up at the same sky and wondered who would come after them? Imagine it. All of human history, every empire, every discovery, every love, every war leading up to us right now, in this fragile moment suspended between the past and whatever remains of the future. We walk through cities filled with lights that outshine the stars, yet deep inside there's a quiet question we avoid. What if this is it? What if humanity's story ends with our reflection glowing in digital screens, with our knowledge compressed into servers and clouds that one day will vanish into dust? The Earth has already seen civilizations rise and fall, their voices buried beneath sand, sea, and soil. Once there were people who thought their monuments would last forever, the builders of pyramids, the sculptors of forgotten gods, the inventors of languages no one remembers. They had art, trade, science, love, faith, and yet silence came for them too. If they could see us now, what would they think? Would they recognize us as their descendants, or as strangers who lost the thread that bound them to the earth? Maybe we're the first generation powerful enough to destroy our world, and the last one who can still save it. Our oceans are warming. Our skies are filling with smoke. Our attention is dissolving into noise. But perhaps being the last civilization doesn't have to mean being the last hope. Maybe this is the test, the moment when humanity must prove that it learned something from every rise and fall before it. The dinosaurs once ruled, but they didn't know their end was coming. Ancient empires once thought they were immortal, but they too fell to time. Yet we're different. We know how fragile it all is. We can imagine the silence that might follow us. We can imagine the earth still spinning, the cities crumbling, the forests reclaiming what was theirs, the wind carrying no human voice. But maybe, just maybe, we can also imagine something else, a civilization that survives not through conquest or technology, but through awareness, through compassion, through the decision to live wisely on the planet that gave us everything. If we are the last civilization, then we are also the keepers of everything that ever mattered. The memory of love, the art that made us feel infinite, the knowledge that allowed us to look beyond ourselves. The question is not whether we are the last, but whether we are worthy of being the last. Because one day the sun will still rise over mountains and oceans that don't remember our names, and all that will remain is the trace of how gently or how carelessly we lived. Maybe the meaning of being human was never about lasting forever. It was about realizing that forever depends on what we do. Now, and maybe that's what makes this moment in history both terrifying and sacred. Because if we are the last civilization, then every choice we make carries the weight of everything that came before and everything that could ever be after. Every act of kindness, every invention, every word we speak into the air could be the final note in the song of humanity. Imagine centuries from now if the earth stands silent, no hum of machines, no cities glowing in the night, only the whisper of wind through the ruins of what once was us. Would the planet mourn us, or would it simply breathe again, free from the noise we made? We often believe we are the masters of the earth, but perhaps we were always its guests, temporary visitors who forgot the terms of our stay. If we are indeed the last civilization, then the story of humankind isn't one of dominance, but of forgetting how to live in harmony, forgetting that the soil beneath our feet is older than any empire, forgetting that no technology can replace the rhythm of rivers, trees, and the quiet pulse of life itself. Yet within that realization, there's still a chance for redemption. Because being the last doesn't have to mean being the lost. We can still turn the page differently. We can still choose preservation over profit, truth over noise, wisdom over speed. We can rebuild not just cities, but consciousness. What if our greatness isn't in the towers we build, but in the humility to protect what's already here? The stars that guided ancient sailors still shine above us. The same moon that lit the deserts and jungles of our ancestors still watches silently. The universe has seen extinction and rebirth countless times, and maybe we too stand at such a threshold, one path leading to disappearance, another toward awakening. The end of a civilization isn't always marked by war or disaster. Sometimes it begins quietly when people stop caring, when they forget to feel wonder, when they lose sight of their purpose. But as long as there's one person who still looks at the stars and feels awe, who still plants a tree, who still believes tomorrow can be better, then the story isn't over. Maybe we are the last civilization, not because we're doomed, but because we are meant to become something wiser, guardians of memory, stewards of creation, protectors of a planet that never asked to be conquered, only understood. And if someday others come after us, if a new intelligence, a new life form, walks this same earth, they will find traces of who we were, not in our machines or monuments, but in the quiet evidence that we learned how to live gently, that we loved deeply, that even at the edge of extinction, we chose awareness over apathy. Perhaps that's what it truly means to be human, to know we may not last forever, and still choose to build beauty in the face of impermanence. Because if we are the last civilization, then the end of our story can still be written with grace, gratitude, and the wisdom to leave behind not ruins, but reminders that we once lived, we once cared, and for a brief, magnificent moment in time, the universe looked through us and saw itself. And in that reflection, that fleeting awareness that we are the universe trying to understand itself, lies the quiet miracle of our existence. Think about it. Every civilization before us, From the Sumerians who etched symbols into clay, to the Mayans who watched the skies, to the philosophers of Greece and the poets of Persia, they all carried the same spark of consciousness, the same hunger to know why, and each of them believed their world would last forever. Yet time has a way of humbling even the proudest empires. Their cities turn to dust, their gods to myths, their names to echoes. Now it's our turn to face the mirror. We look at our digital towers, our satellites orbiting like new moons, our endless data streams flowing faster than rivers, and we call it progress. But what if it's just another phase in the same ancient cycle? Rise, peak, forget, fall. What if our technology, instead of connecting us, is only accelerating our forgetfulness, making us gods without wisdom, creators without restraint? We build machines that learn faster than we can feel. We speak to each other through glass and code, yet struggle to truly listen. We search for life in distant galaxies, while the forests that birthed us are burning in silence. Maybe the last civilization doesn't end in a dramatic explosion or collapse. Maybe it ends slowly, one lost language at a time. One extinct species, one generation too distracted to notice what's vanishing. And one day, a child might stand under a night sky that's darker than ours and wonder if the stars were ever brighter, if there were ever people who looked up and cared. That thought alone should shake us. Because if we are the last, then everything beautiful that humanity ever felt, love, wonder, art, music, mercy, could end with us. The laughter of children, the rhythm of heartbeats, the stories whispered under starlight, all gone. Unless we learn how to protect what truly matters. Yet maybe that's the secret thread tying every civilization together, the hope that someone, somewhere will carry the light forward. Maybe our purpose isn't to conquer, but to continue, to be the bridge between what was and what could still be, to plant seeds we'll never see bloom, to build not for eternity, but for the possibility that life in any form might one day find meaning again. If we are the last civilization on Earth, then the universe entrusted us with something sacred, the memory of existence itself. And perhaps that's why even when we fall, even when our cities crumble and our systems fail, we still write, we still create, we still dream. Because deep down we know that to exist, to be aware of existence, is the rarest gift of all. The question isn't whether we are the last civilization. The question is, will we be the one that finally learns to live as if the world matters more than ourselves? Because maybe, just maybe, the end of civilization isn't destruction, it's transformation. The shedding of arrogance, the rediscovery of awe. The moment when humanity finally realizes that survival isn't about power or progress, but about remembering that we belong to something infinite. And if we can remember that truly, humbly, fully, then even if we are the last civilization, we won't be the final chapter. We'll be the turning point. The moment when life chose awareness over oblivion, and silence became the seed of a new beginning. What if we're the last civilization on Earth, not the first to rise from the soil of creation, but the final echo of countless forgotten worlds, standing at the edge of time with all our noise and light, believing we are eternal while history quietly whispers that nothing ever is? Imagine the civilizations before us, the Sumerians carving meaning into clay, the Egyptians raising monuments to the sky, the Mayans mapping stars that no longer shine. Each one thought their world would last, yet all turned to dust, their gods to myths, their stories fading into the wind. And now it's our turn beneath the same sun that watched them fall, building towers of glass and steel, feeding machines that think faster than we do, reaching for planets while forgetting how to love the one that breathes beneath our feet. And as we drown in data and invention, we may not see the slow unraveling, not a dramatic collapse, but a quiet one. A species that forgets to feel, forests that vanish while we scroll, languages dying in silence, oceans rising with no one listening, until maybe one day a child far in the future will look at the sky and wonder if there were ever people who cared enough to save it. And in that thought lies the truth that terrifies and inspires, that everything beautiful about being human, every story, song, prayer, and heartbeat, could end with us unless we remember what it means to protect, to preserve, to belong. Maybe our purpose was never to dominate, but to continue, to pass the light forward like every civilization tried to before it faded, to plant seeds whose bloom we'll never see, to build not for eternity but for meaning. Because if we are the last civilization, then perhaps we are the keepers of existence itself, the final guardians of memory and mercy. And maybe, if we learn humility before the universe, If we live as though the world matters more than our desires, if we can see the sacred in the fragile, then even if we are the last, we will not be the end, we will be the beginning of awareness, the turning point where creation remembered itself and chose to cherish what it once took for granted. And maybe that's the paradox of being human, that we stand at the peak of knowledge yet tremble at the thought of meaning, that we build machines that can simulate life, yet struggle to understand our own, that we search for other civilizations across galaxies without realizing that perhaps the silence of the cosmos isn't emptiness, but a warning, a reminder that countless worlds may have reached where we are now and vanished beneath their own brilliance. Maybe they too believed progress was invincible until it consumed the very ground they walked on. And if that's true, then the silence between stars isn't loneliness, it's memory. It's the echo of civilizations that forgot humility. It's the universe telling us to slow down before we repeat the same story written 1,000 times before, in light years and dust. Because every empire that has ever existed fell not from weakness but from arrogance, from believing it was immune to time. And now, as our world spins faster than ever, our oceans choke, our skies warm, and our hearts grow numb, the question becomes not whether we will survive, but whether we deserve to. Yet in that uncertainty lies hope, because awareness is the first step toward redemption. And as long as we can still feel wonder, as long as a single person can look at the stars and feel both small and responsible, as long as love outlives fear, we are not lost. We are learning, evolving, awakening. And maybe that's what every civilization was meant to do: reach the brink, look into the abyss, and realize that true greatness was never in power or conquest, but in preservation, in kindness, in the quiet choice to protect the fragile miracle of life that has survived against impossible odds for billions of years. Because if we are the last civilization on Earth, then this moment right now is not an ending but a test, a chance to prove that we can rise not by invention alone but by conscience, by balance, by finally understanding that everything we build means nothing if we forget the heartbeat of the world beneath our feet. And maybe if we can hold on to that truth long enough, the future won't remember us as the last civilization, but as the first to truly understand what it meant to be alive. And perhaps that is the story humanity was always meant to write, not one of endless expansion, but of awakening, of realizing that every invention, every structure, every triumph of our species was only a mirror reflecting our deeper search for belonging, that we built cities to feel connected, created art to touch the eternal, reached for the stars to escape the loneliness of being aware. Yet the truth was always closer than we imagined, in the whisper of wind through trees, in the pulse of the oceans, in the unspoken rhythm that binds every living thing, reminding us that we are not separate from the earth but born of it, shaped by it, sustained by it. But we've forgotten that sacred bond, trading silence for noise, reflection for distraction, turning our existence into a race with no finish line, where success is measured in accumulation, not alignment. And the tragedy is not that the planet might end, it's that we might lose the soul that once made us capable of wonder. And still, hope lingers in the smallest moments, in the way a child marvels at a butterfly, in the compassion of strangers, in the quiet persistence of life breaking through concrete proof that even after centuries of chaos, the essence of humanity refuses to die. Maybe we are the last civilization, not because others failed, but because we were chosen to learn from their silence, to carry every forgotten wisdom in our DNA and decide differently this time, to heal instead of dominate, to remember instead of erase, to coexist instead of conquer. Because maybe the real test of intelligence is not the ability to build empires, but the humility to keep them alive without destroying everything that made them possible. And if someday, long after we're gone, another form of life digs through the layers of our time and finds the remnants of our cities, may they see not only our mistakes, but our beauty too, that despite all our flaws we loved, we dreamed. We reached for meaning in a universe vast and indifferent, and in doing so, we left behind something greater than monuments or machines. We left behind the memory of consciousness, the mark of beings who dared to ask not just how to survive, but why existence mattered at all. So if we are indeed the last civilization on Earth, then let our story not be one of decay, but of understanding, of the moment creation looked at itself, and finally learn to cherish what it had been given, so that even if the stars forget our names, the essence of what we felt, the love, the awe, the awareness will ripple forever through time, whispering softly to whatever comes next. We were here, and we tried to understand. And maybe that's all the universe ever asked of us, not perfection, not permanence, but understanding. To live long enough and deep enough to realize that consciousness was never meant to be a weapon but a window. That awareness itself was the bridge between creation and its creator, and that every breath, every sunrise, every fragile heartbeat was an invitation to remember where we came from and what we were entrusted with. Imagine for a moment that we are the last spark in an ancient chain that before us, countless worlds lived and perished, each leaving behind whispers of wisdom carried through atoms and light, waiting for a being capable of remembering. Maybe that being is us. Maybe humanity was never a random accident, but a final attempt by life to understand itself before silence returned. But what if we squander that chance, drown it beneath noise, greed, and disconnection? What if the last civilization forgets to look inward, chasing immortality while losing its soul? Because immortality was never meant to be about living forever, but about living meaningfully, about creating something so true, so pure, that it outlives you in essence. If not in form, look around. The cities gleam, the machines hum, the sky glows with satellites and signals, and yet our hearts ache with a hunger no invention can feed. That hunger is not for progress, it's for presence. The same longing that once drove our ancestors to light fires in the dark now burns inside us to rediscover what we lost. Simplicity, reverence, connection. We keep searching for alien civilizations, yet the real mystery might be right here. How a species so fragile, so temporary, was given the power to imagine eternity. Maybe we are the last, not because the world is ending, but because we are approaching the threshold where humanity must evolve from conquerors to caretakers, from thinkers to feelers, from consumers to creators of balance. And if this is the end, let it not be a collapse but a cleansing. Not the extinction of life but the birth of understanding. Let the last civilization be the one that finally learns how to listen to the earth, to each other, to the quiet truth humming beneath all things. Because in the end, the measure of our existence won't be our skyscrapers, our technology, or our wealth. It will be whether we learn to live with grace, to walk softly, to build gently, to leave more beauty than we found. If we can do that, then even if the stars one day burn out, even if the earth itself turns cold and silent, the story of us, the story of beings who remembered love in a universe that forgot, will remain, carried forever in the breath of eternity. Proof that once, in a small corner of creation, life looked at itself and smiled. And maybe that smile, that quiet, wordless recognition of what it means to exist, is the true legacy of humanity, far greater than any monument or discovery. Because long after the last city fades, after our languages dissolve into dust, after our songs stop echoing in the air, the energy of who we were, the choices we made, the compassion we gave, the truth we sought, will still vibrate through the fabric of the cosmos. Every act of kindness, every moment of awareness becomes eternal in that way. Maybe that's what keeps the universe alive, not stars or galaxies, but consciousness choosing love over indifference. Perhaps that's why existence gave us emotion not as weakness, but as proof of connection, as a thread binding us to something higher than survival. And when you think about it, maybe all of creation is like a vast tapestry of stories, and every civilization was a verse in a poem too vast to be understood at once. Some verses spoke of wonder, some of war, some of loss and rebirth, but all were written in the same ink of awareness, the same longing to understand what we truly are. If we are the last civilization, then perhaps we are meant to be the verse that completes the meaning, not the one that burns brightest, but the one that finally understands the song. And that understanding might not come through science or power or conquest. It might come through stillness, through remembering that life itself is sacred. Imagine if every human suddenly paused, if, for a moment, every machine stopped, every voice went silent, and we all just looked at the sky. In that silence, we would hear it, the pulse that connects everything, the soft rhythm of existence, reminding us that we're not separate, never were. And in that realization, maybe we'd finally stop trying to control the world and start trying to care for it. Because the greatest civilizations are not the ones that build the most, but the ones that preserve what was already perfect. Maybe our destiny was never to conquer the stars, but to understand the miracle of having one to live under. To cherish the rare privilege of being aware, even for a fleeting moment in the vast ocean of time, And if someday, long after we've gone, another being stands upon the ruins of our world and wonders who we were, let the wind tell them. We were dreamers, seekers, protectors, flawed, yes, but capable of love so deep it could move mountains and heal worlds. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all the universe ever wanted for us to awaken, to feel, to remember that existence itself was the greatest gift, and to finally live as if we understood it. And if we ever do understand it, if we reach that quiet realization that all of this, every heartbeat, every sunrise, every atom in our bodies is part of one vast breathing unity, then maybe, for the first time in the long history of creation, awareness will finally find peace. Because we've always been searching, always reaching outward toward God, stars, meanings, answers, but maybe the entire journey was meant to bring us inward, to the center of the soul, where stillness lives. Perhaps the end of civilization isn't destruction at all, but arrival the moment humanity finally becomes still enough to listen, to feel the harmony that's been playing beneath everything since the beginning of time. Maybe this is what it means to evolve, not to grow louder but quieter. Not to conquer more but to need less. Not to invent endlessly, but to rediscover what was sacred all along. And if we are the last civilization, maybe it's because we've reached the edge of the story, the part where creation asks whether consciousness can live in balance with itself. We've been given every tool, every miracle, every warning. We've crossed oceans, split atoms, decoded stars, but the final frontier was never out there, it's within us, in the vast uncharted landscape of the human heart. Can we live with wisdom instead of pride? Can we love without condition? Can we protect what we did not create, but were blessed to experience? Those are the questions that decide whether this civilization will end or transcend. And maybe that's the beauty of it all, that the universe didn't make us perfect, but capable of choice. That even standing at the edge of extinction, we still have the power to turn back toward light. That even if the world is burning, we can plant something new in the ashes. Because every act of care, every truth spoken in love, every decision made with humility, those are seeds of a new beginning. And if we tend them, even in the darkness, maybe the earth will remember. Maybe the rivers will forgive. Maybe the skies will open once more, not in punishment but in renewal. And then, long after we're gone, the wind will carry our memory not as a warning, but as a prayer that once on a fragile blue world, there lived beings who looked at the stars and finally understood what they were meant to do. Not to rule creation, but to honor it. To be the voice of awareness in a universe of silence. To be the bridge between what was and what could still be. And if that's the final chapter of humanity, then let it be written not in despair, but in grace, the story of a civilization that almost forgot, but remembered just in time, that life was never about becoming more, but about becoming enough. And maybe in that remembrance, in that final awakening of heart and mind, lies the true destiny of our existence, the purpose behind every rise and fall, every age of brilliance and every shadow of ruin. Because what if all of history, every civilization that came before, was leading to this single quiet realization that we were never meant to master the world, only to care for it? What if the test was never about how high we could climb, but how gently we could stand? Perhaps we are the last civilization, not because there will be no others, but because this is the generation meant to understand what no one else did, that creation is not ours to own, but to nurture, that progress means nothing without peace, and that intelligence without compassion is just another form of destruction. Think about it, we built systems to make life easier, yet they made our souls heavier. We connected the world, yet forgot how to truly connect. We conquered distance but lost depth. And maybe that's why we stand here now, between two possibilities to either repeat the story of collapse or write something entirely new. Because even at the edge of extinction, humanity has always had a strange, sacred gift, the ability to begin again. From every fall we learn to rise, from every mistake we learn to feel. Maybe that is what separates us from the civilizations before us, not technology, but awareness. The awareness that time is not infinite, that every sunset is a gift, that every breath is borrowed, and that everything we love, from the forests to the oceans, to the faces we hold dear, can vanish if we do not protect it. So if we truly are the last civilization, maybe this is our purpose: to choose differently. To finally step out of the cycle of arrogance and into the rhythm of harmony. To use our power not to shape the earth in our image, but to live as its reflection. To look at a mountain and see not a resource but a miracle. To look at an animal and see not a lesser being, but a living prayer. To look at each other and see not competition, but continuation. Because life is not measured in how long we last, but in how deeply we love. And maybe, when all is said and done, when the final city fades and the stars outshine our memory, the universe will remember us not as the last, but as the first civilization that finally understood that being alive was never about domination, but devotion. That existence itself was the greatest act of mercy, and that the only way to survive forever is to live as if forever depends on the care we give today. And maybe that is the ultimate truth hidden beneath all our noise and ambition, that we were never chosen to rule this world but to understand it, to see its beauty, to protect its fragility, to realize that the universe did not make us to be kings of creation, but caretakers of its wonder. And if we are the last civilization, then this is not a punishment but a responsibility. Because perhaps the story of humanity was never about building empires or chasing eternity, but about learning what it means to exist with awareness, to love in a world that forgets how, to be gentle in a universe that thrives on chaos. And when you think about it, maybe every rise and fall, every discovery, every heartbreak, every war and peace was just life trying to teach us the same lesson, in different forms, that everything we destroy in ourselves, and everything we heal within the whole. And if there is still time, if the last ember of hope still burns in a single heart, then perhaps the world is not ending at all, but simply pausing, waiting for us to remember. Because the final evolution of any civilization is not technological, but spiritual. When creation recognizes its own reflection and chooses to protect it instead of consume it. And maybe that is where we stand now, at the threshold of remembrance, where our greatest power lies not in what we can build, but in what we can preserve. Not in how far we can go, but in how deeply we can feel. Because the stars do not envy us. They mirror us, burning with the same fire that glows inside our souls, reminding us that we are not separate from the cosmos, but part of its heartbeat. And if we listen closely enough, maybe we can still align with that rhythm, still turn back from the edge, still become the civilization that did not fall but transformed, that looked at the ruins of its own arrogance and chose humility instead, that found peace not in control but in connection. And if that happens, then even if our cities crumble and our names fade into the dust of time, we will not have vanished in vain, because our awareness, our compassion, our understanding will ripple beyond history itself, carried in the light, remembered in the silence, proving that once, for a brief but beautiful moment, life on Earth knew what it meant to exist and to care. And maybe that care, that quiet, invisible force of compassion, woven into the fabric of our being, is the real reason we were ever given the gift of consciousness in the first place. Because while stars burn and fade without thought, we were given the ability to wonder, to question, to love, to feel the weight of existence and still choose kindness. And that choice, however fragile, is what makes us eternal. Perhaps the universe scattered life across time and space, hoping that somewhere, someday, one civilization would awaken not with power but with understanding, not with greed but with grace. And maybe we are that civilization standing at the crossroads between memory and oblivion, between arrogance and humility, between becoming the caretakers of creation or the architects of our own silence. And the answer will not come from science or politics or technology, but from within, from the stillness we have forgotten to listen to. Because somewhere deep inside the human soul lies a memory older than civilization itself, a whisper that we were never alone, that everything alive is connected, breathing in rhythm with a greater harmony we once knew but drifted away from. And if we can remember that, if we can strip away the noise, the division, the illusion of separation, maybe we can return to that state of oneness where every breath is a prayer, every act of mercy a reflection of truth, every moment an acknowledgement of the sacred. And then perhaps the end of civilization won't be an extinction, but an evolution, a moment when humanity finally outgrows its ego and becomes something gentler, wiser, whole. And when that happens, the earth will not mourn us but breathe again. The skies will clear, the seas will sing, and the stars will witness that in the final moment of awareness, we did not choose destruction. We chose remembrance, we chose harmony. We chose to be what we were always meant to be, the living voice of creation realizing its own divine design, the guardians of balance, the dreamers who awoke before the final dawn and learned that eternity was never beyond us but within us all along. And if we ever truly awaken to that, If humanity finally sees that the meaning of existence was never hidden in the stars, but reflected in every drop of rain, every heartbeat, every act of selfless love, then perhaps the word civilization will no longer mean cities or borders or inventions, but consciousness itself, a shared pulse of life, learning to live with reverence. Because when you look at all we've done, the wars and wonders, the progress and pain, it becomes clear that our story has always been one of forgetting and remembering, of falling apart and finding our way back to the truth, that everything we destroy within ourselves, and everything we nurture, we restore in the whole. And maybe that's why creation allowed us to exist, to feel the weight of choice, to test whether intelligence could coexist with empathy, whether power could kneel before grace, whether awareness could evolve into wisdom. Perhaps we are the experiment, the mirror, the living prayer of the universe asking itself what it means to be awake. And if we are the last civilization, then this is our sacred moment to prove that awareness can be love in action, that progress can coexist with peace, that humanity can become a bridge instead of a wound. Because the truth is, the world doesn't need saving. It needs remembering. The forests already know how to heal. The oceans already know how to breathe. The stars already know how to shine. It is we who have forgotten how to live among them, to live with them, not above them. And if we can return to that harmony, if we can walk the earth not as conquerors, but as caretakers, not as owners, but as guests, then maybe this era will not end in silence, but in song, a quiet, eternal rhythm where every soul, every creature, every particle of light remembers that it belongs. And even if we vanish, even if no trace of us remains, that song will go on, carried in the breath of wind, in the whisper of water, in the glow of distant galaxies, telling the story of a species that finally understood that to exist was to love, and to love was to last forever. And maybe that's the point, not to be remembered as the greatest civilization, but to become the one that finally remembered what greatness truly means. Not dominance, not technology, not wealth, but harmony with each other, with the earth, with the unseen rhythm that binds galaxies and grass alike. Perhaps the end isn't destruction, but transformation, where our machines become extensions of empathy. Our knowledge becomes humility, and our endless seeking turns inward, toward the infinite landscapes of the soul. Imagine a time when humanity no longer builds monuments of steel, but monuments of kindness, when progress is measured not by how far we reach into space, but by how gently we tread on our planet. Maybe in that shift, the universe itself takes a breath, relieved, perhaps even proud, that its most unpredictable creation finally evolved not just in mind, but in heart. And if that happens, even if the sun swallows us one day, even if all we've built turns to dust, something far more enduring will remain, the echo of compassion reverberating through the cosmos, proof that consciousness at its highest form chose love over fear. So if we truly are the last civilization, then let this be our legacy, that we didn't end screaming into the void, but whispering into eternity, that we understood, that the meaning of it all was never hidden in gods or stars or codes, but in the way we held one another when everything was falling apart, that even at the edge of extinction, we chose tenderness. And in that choice we became infinite. And maybe, in some distant corner of the universe, light years away, another species will rise, intelligent, curious, fragile, and as they peer into the void, searching for signs of others, they'll catch a faint, inexplicable signal. Not a message of conquest or calculation, but a hum, a pulse, a vibration carrying the memory of who we were. They won't know our names, our languages, or our empires, but they'll feel something, a strange warmth rippling through the cosmic silence, the residue of our collective hope. And maybe that's how civilizations truly communicate, not through technology, but through resonance, through the emotional fingerprint they leave imprinted on the fabric of time. Perhaps they'll sense that somewhere long ago, a species looked up at the same stars and wondered the same questions. Who are we? Why are we here? Are we alone? And in that moment, across galaxies and epochs, connection will be reborn. Because existence itself might not be a competition for survival, but a conversation between souls, every civilization adding its own verse to the cosmic poem. And maybe we, with all our chaos and brilliance, were simply writing ours line by line, heartbreak by heartbreak, invention by invention. And when our chapter closes, the story doesn't end. It continues, carried by the energy we released, the beauty we created, and the love we refused to abandon, even when the world was burning. So if we are indeed the last civilization, Perhaps we are also the bridge, the final whisper, before the next awakening, proof that even in the vast emptiness, life dared to dream, to feel, to care. And maybe, just maybe, that was always the universe's plan to experience itself through us one last time. And if that's true, then maybe our purpose was never to dominate or outlast, but to witness, to marvel at creation's fleeting perfection, to leave behind traces of kindness so gentle they outlive the ruins of our cities. Because when the last monument falls and the final satellite goes dark, what remains won't be the data we stored or the systems we built, but the invisible imprint of our choices, how we treated each other, how we protected the fragile, how we shared wonder with those who had forgotten it. And even if no one ever rediscovers Earth, even if our entire history becomes cosmic dust drifting through nebulae, the essence of what we were, the music, the laughter, the compassion, will remain encoded in light, radiating forever through the universe. Perhaps that's the real immortality. Every civilization seeks not in survival but in resonance. Because maybe creation remembers every heartbeat that ever pulsed with gratitude, every tear that ever fell out of love, every moment when a creature looked at the sky and chose to believe there was meaning beyond survival. And so, even if we're the last civilization, we are also the proof that consciousness existed, that awareness once bloomed on a small blue planet and dared to reflect the stars. Maybe that reflection itself is eternal, bouncing endlessly across galaxies, unseen but never lost, because light, once released, never truly dies. And so we too will remain not as bodies, not as ruins, but as echoes woven into the universe's infinite memory, a whisper that says, "We were here, and we tried to understand." Maybe that's the strange, poetic truth about existence, that civilizations don't really end. They just dissolve into memory, absorbed back into the infinite story the universe keeps telling through time and silence. Maybe what we call extinction is just translation from matter to meaning, from flesh to frequency. Imagine if we are the last civilization on Earth, the final chapter in a story billions of years long, stretching from the first single-celled life that shimmered in the ocean to the last human heart still beating under the weight of artificial skies. Imagine walking through the ruins of a once luminous world, skyscrapers swallowed by vines, oceans reclaiming cities, stars flickering through the shattered domes of what used to be observatories. You feel the wind whisper through the remains of humanity's greatest ambitions, broken satellites drifting in the dark, monuments standing like forgotten prayers. But as eerie as it sounds, there's beauty in that stillness, because it means life existed here. And for a brief, incredible moment, the universe got to look at itself through our eyes. Perhaps we were never meant to last forever, but to illuminate like a spark that burns bright enough to be remembered by the void. We built machines, mapped the stars, split atoms, and created music that could make entire civilizations cry. But maybe our truest purpose wasn't progress, it was reflection. We were meant to feel, to experience joy, loss, creation, love, to taste what consciousness could be before fading back into the vastness that birthed us. If you think about it, civilizations rise and fall like waves, each leaving behind fragments of wisdom for the next tide to discover. Maybe there were countless worlds before our species that dreamed, built, and vanished, their echoes traveling silently through the cosmic dark. Maybe Earth itself has hosted others before us, intelligent beings long erased by time, their traces buried deep beneath tectonic layers or erased by floods and fire. And maybe one day, far in the future, another species will walk this same soil, find our bones and satellites, and wonder who we were, how we lived, what we believed in. They'll see signs of brilliance and signs of madness, technology that reached for the stars and weapons that could destroy them. They'll see beauty and contradiction in equal measure, just like we do when we study ancient ruins. And perhaps they'll understand that intelligence isn't about survival, it's about awareness, the courage to ask questions even when no answers come. And as they piece together our story, they'll find art, music, poetry, evidence that we didn't just exist, we felt. They'll realize we built not only cities but meanings, that even in our chaos we searched for order, and even in despair we longed for hope. Maybe that's the mark of every great civilization, not how long it lasted, but how deeply it lived. And maybe the reason civilizations keep disappearing is because they all reach the same truth, that material achievement means nothing without inner clarity, that progress without peace is just noise. Maybe that realization leads to silence, and that silence is what we call the end. But perhaps it's not an end at all, it's transformation. Because if we are the last civilization, maybe we are also the culmination, the one meant to understand the story's purpose before the curtain closes. And maybe that purpose is simple: to remember, to honor what came before and prepare the way for what comes after, even if we'll never see it. To act not as conquerors of time, but as witnesses of wonder. Maybe we were chosen to be the universe's mirror, to reflect its beauty and pain, to give meaning to its vast, unfeeling expanse. And maybe that's why we can't stop searching for truth, for God, for connection, because deep down we know that everything around us is alive with purpose, that every atom carries intention, every heartbeat echoes eternity. Maybe we are the only ones left, not because we failed, but because we reached the point where creation no longer needs another civilization. It needs remembrance. Our role isn't to build forever, but to see deeply, to live with awe, to leave behind a trace of grace before we fade. Perhaps this is what it means to be the last to carry the torch of consciousness as far as it can go, knowing it will one day extinguish, yet walking forward anyway. To love even when love can't save us, to create even when the world forgets, to hope even when the sky falls silent. Maybe one day, when the last human breath dissolves into the wind, the universe itself will pause for a moment, not out of sorrow, but recognition, because it will remember us, not our cities, not our machines, but the feeling we carried, the ache of awareness, the longing to belong, the miracle of understanding. And maybe in that quiet recognition, something new will begin, not another civilization, but another kind of consciousness, shaped by everything we've been. Perhaps our story will become the seed for another world, another being, another start. Because energy never dies, it transforms, and so do we. Maybe our kindness will become light in another galaxy. Our curiosity will become life on another planet. Our love will become gravity, pulling souls together again. Perhaps we are not the end, but the echo, the gentle aftersound of creation's most daring experiment, awareness. Maybe our existence was a message written by the universe to itself, saying, "You are not alone. You are capable of feeling, of meaning, of wonder." And when that message fades into the cosmic background, its vibration will remain forever, because what was once truly felt never disappears. It just changes form. Maybe that's the secret of life, not to last, but to leave a vibration strong enough to be felt across eternity. And so if we are indeed the last civilization on Earth, let us live not with fear, but with fullness. Let us marvel, create, forgive, connect, because every act of compassion is a thread tying us back to the divine source of existence. And when all is gone and the stars move on, we'll remain not in flesh, not in monuments, but in resonance. The whisper that says to all creation, "We were here, we saw, we wondered, we felt, and that was enough." And if that whisper continues to travel, carried by waves of light and gravity through the endless sea of stars, it may reach places we'll never know, places untouched by our mistakes or triumphs, and there it will hum quietly, like the last note of a forgotten symphony that refuses to fade. Maybe other beings far beyond our reach will one day sense that faint echo and pause, feeling something ancient stir inside them, a pull, a familiarity they can't explain, because the energy we left behind will still vibrate with the same longing that once filled human hearts. Maybe they'll see flashes of oceans that shimmered beneath twin moons, forests that breathed in rhythm with the wind, and creatures that looked up at the sky not just to survive, but to dream. And perhaps in that brief spark of recognition, they'll realize they're not alone in their wandering, that someone somewhere once felt the same awe for existence itself. Maybe that is how civilizations never truly vanish. They become memories woven into the soul of the universe, carried like constellations whose light arrives long after the stars have died. And maybe the universe needs these stories, the rise and fall of consciousness, to know itself fully, to experience joy and loss, creation and decay, hope and surrender. Perhaps that's the rhythm of everything, the endless cycle of emergence and return, of awakening and rest. And if we are the last, then we are also the culmination of that rhythm, the final crescendo before the eternal silence that follows, the universe's last inhale before the long exhale of eternity. But even that silence, if you listen closely, won't be empty. It will hum softly with everything we've ever been, every heartbeat, every song, every prayer, every act of love that refused to die. Because love, unlike civilizations, doesn't fade with time. It dissolves into everything. It becomes the very essence of what is. Maybe the universe itself was built on love. Not the human kind that clings or fears, but the boundless kind that creates, nurtures, and lets go. And if we are the last civilization, then our final duty isn't to preserve what we built, but to understand what we are, the living expression of that love. Maybe that's why our greatest minds, from ancient poets to modern scientists, kept returning to the same mystery that beneath all the chaos. There's an intelligence, a harmony, a pulse that binds everything together. Maybe we've been feeling it all along in music, in nature, in moments of silence when the heart expands for no reason at all. Maybe that's the universe recognizing itself through us, the infinite marveling at its own reflection. And so even if our cities crumble, our words vanish, and our species fades into myth, the universe will still remember what it felt like to be human, the laughter of children, the courage of the broken, the quiet strength of those who kept believing when everything fell apart. Because those moments are eternal, they sink into the structure of reality itself, reshaping it in ways no destruction can erase. Maybe one day, far from here, a new civilization will rise not from technology, but from stillness, not from conquest, but from compassion. And when they reach the same questions we did, when they wonder if they're alone, they'll feel that same vibration echoing faintly through space, and they'll know not with words, but with recognition that others once lived, once dreamed, once loved enough to leave an imprint on infinity. And maybe that's all the proof the universe ever needed. Not that life existed, but that life mattered, that it was capable of beauty even while knowing it would end. So if we are the last civilization, then let's not mourn what's ending but celebrate what we were, the universe's final masterpiece, flawed, fragile, yet capable of reflection. Maybe that's what makes us divine, not power, but awareness, the ability to look at the vast unknown and still choose wonder over fear. Maybe our extinction won't be tragedy, but transcendence, the moment when consciousness folds back into its source, carrying everything it has learned through eons of love and loss. And maybe that return will be peaceful, like dusk meeting night, a homecoming rather than an ending. Because perhaps the story of existence has always been a circle, not a fall, not a rise, but a return to wholeness. And in that circle, nothing is truly lost. It simply changes form. We began as stardust and thought, and will end as stardust and memory, completing the cycle of awareness. And so if you ever find yourself gazing at the stars, wondering if this is all there is, remember, we are part of something that never dies. Something that feels through us, learns through us, and returns to itself through us. And maybe, when the last light of humanity fades, it will do so with grace, not in fear or regret, but in gratitude. Because even if we were the last civilization, we were also the first to understand what it meant to exist, to love, to create, to ask why, and that, more than anything we've built, is what made us eternal. And maybe that's the quiet miracle hidden behind all of creation, that even when everything fades, the intention behind it never does. It lingers, quietly sculpting new beginnings in unseen corners of existence, because energy born from consciousness doesn't vanish. It transforms into new expressions of awareness, waiting to bloom somewhere else. Maybe one day, eons from now, far beyond the ashes of our world, those same particles that once made up your breath and mine will gather again, drawn together by an unseen harmony, and awaken into new beings who look up at new skies and feel the same curiosity that once defined humanity. Perhaps they'll walk through alien landscapes, touch strange oceans, and yet somehow feel a flicker of familiarity, as if the soul of Earth still whispers through them. Maybe they'll build, love, laugh, and lose, repeating the eternal pattern, because the story of consciousness is not linear, it's cyclical. And even if we are the last on this version of Earth, we may not be the last ever. Perhaps existence itself is a classroom, and each civilization is a lesson in self-discovery. We began with survival, moved through power, learned through pain, and ended with understanding the final realization that meaning was never in domination, but in connection. Maybe the universe doesn't evolve through destruction, but through awareness, each civilization serving as a neuron in the cosmic brain, firing briefly before merging back into the whole, expanding the understanding of what it means to exist. And so if we are the last, maybe it's because the universe has learned what it needed to through us, that beauty and compassion are not side effects of life, but its purpose. Perhaps we were the experiment that proved consciousness can love without reason, can create without reward, can hope even when surrounded by darkness. And maybe that hope is what keeps existence itself alive. Maybe the light that escapes our dying cities will travel for billions of years, carrying not just energy, but emotion, an invisible fingerprint of humanity's essence. When it finally reaches some distant unborn world, it might brush against the eyes of another sentient being, awakening in them a strange sense of déjà vu, an echo of our collective heart. They won't know where it came from, but they'll feel inspired to build, to dream, to wonder, to reach beyond themselves, and that will be us, living again through them. In that sense, maybe civilizations don't die, they evolve across dimensions of time, gifting the universe with deeper self-awareness each time they bloom and fade. And if we are the last civilization of this planet, then our final act should not be despair, but devotion to look upon creation with reverence, to honor the mystery that let us exist at all. Maybe our extinction, when it comes, will be quiet, not with fire and chaos, but with surrender, the soft acceptance of a soul that has finally seen enough to understand its source. Perhaps the last human won't die screaming but smiling, watching the sun sink behind a broken skyline, realizing that even this ending is part of something infinitely greater. And maybe in that moment, when silence finally envelops the earth, the universe will exhale not in sorrow but in peace, because through us, it saw itself clearly for the first time. Maybe the meaning of everything was never hidden in the stars, but in the way we looked at them, the wonder, the humility, the ache to belong. Maybe that gaze was the connection all along, the bridge between the finite and the infinite. And perhaps when we're gone, that gaze will remain reflected in the light that continues to travel, carrying our questions, our songs, our faith. Because to exist was itself an act of love. Every sunrise, every birth, every act of kindness was the universe loving itself through us. And maybe when the cosmos finally returns to silence, it will remember that love as warmth, as light, as eternal motion. Maybe that's what creation truly is. Love expressing itself as time, as matter, as us. And if that's true, then we were never really the last civilization. We were simply love in its final, most conscious form, returning home, one heartbeat at a time. And as we drift further into the uncertainty of our own age, our cities rising like glass forests, our data swirling in invisible skies, our wars fought in silence through screens, the haunting thought remains: what if we are not the pinnacle, but the repetition? What if the ruins beneath our feet are the warnings of civilizations that mastered their world, only to lose it? The ancient builders who carved mountains, the sky-gazers who mapped the stars, the dreamers who vanished without trace, what if they too believed they would last forever? Our oceans could be holding their monuments, our deserts their scripts, our clouds their memories. Every technological leap we celebrate could be a rediscovery of something already known, lost to time, buried under the arrogance of survival. The silence of the deep sea might be humming with the echoes of machines older than history, their creators long turned to dust. The strange magnetic patterns under Antarctica, the glassy plains of ancient meteor sites, the black pyramids rumored in uncharted lands, they might not be mysteries, but memories. And maybe the dinosaurs, those colossal kings of an ancient Earth, were never just beasts of instinct, but the precursors to the consciousness we inherited, a biological draft, before the human script began. What if extinction is not an end, but a reset, each age rising, shining, collapsing over and over again, until the planet forgets? Our satellites could one day fall from orbit like metal rain, our skyscrapers crumble into the sea, and our names dissolve into myth. New beings may emerge after millions of years, discovering traces of us, fragments of silicon, shards of circuits, half-buried monuments that once reached the heavens, and they, too, might ask, who were these creatures? Were they gods or fools? Were they the first to reach for eternity, or the last to understand it? Perhaps they will study our bones and wonder how a species that could split the atom still failed to sustain itself. They might find our internet preserved in some quantum archive and laugh at our wars over pixels, our endless chase for validation, our brilliance wasted on vanity. And maybe they will see the same patterns we see in the fossils of the past, a rise, a peak, and a fall. What if civilization is a cycle, not a line? What if we are simply at the crest, destined to fade like the others before us, leaving behind just enough to spark the curiosity of whoever comes next? It's humbling and terrifying to think that the stars we gaze upon each night may have witnessed countless worlds like ours burn and vanish. That the universe, vast and ancient, might view our entire existence as a flicker. Yet within that flicker lies everything: love, art, discovery, sorrow, The laughter of children, the silence of death, and maybe that's the point. Maybe existence was never meant to be permanent, only experienced. Maybe survival is not about lasting forever, but leaving behind meaning for whoever finds our ashes. So if we truly are the last civilization on Earth, then every act of creation matters, every painting, every discovery, every story told, because they might be the only proof that once humanity lived, loved, and tried to understand the infinite. And if one day a distant species finds a recording of our voices, a fragment of our world floating through the void, may they know we were not gods or monsters, just beings trying to make sense of the silence between the stars. And maybe in that silence, they'll hear something familiar, not words, but intention, the pulse of curiosity, the ache for connection, the same ancient desire that drives all consciousness to look upward and wonder. Perhaps they will find our fossilized cities beneath layers of coral, our satellites drifting like forgotten moons, our monuments weathered into unrecognizable shapes, and still sense that we tried. Tried to map the universe, to outlast death, to name the unknown. They might discover our libraries encoded in glass, our DNA preserved in vaults beneath melting ice, and realize we feared extinction but believed in rebirth. Maybe they will build upon our fragments using our tools, decoding our languages, reanimating our machines, unaware that they're completing the story we began. Or maybe they'll start over entirely, inventing their own myths about us, gods who fell from the sky, titans who destroyed themselves, creators who made beauty and chaos in equal measure. And if they too reach the point we have, if they too become powerful enough to alter the planet, will they make the same mistakes? Will they burn their skies, poison their oceans, build monuments to greed and call it progress? Or will they learn from our ruins? Because the truth is, every civilization believes it's the last until it's gone. The Mayans, the Sumerians, the Egyptians, they all thought their knowledge would never fade. Yet time has a way of humbling every species. The earth buries, the wind erases, the sea reclaims, and still something survives, a spark, a symbol, a whisper in the dark. Maybe that's what eternity really is, not an unbroken existence, but a series of echoes that never quite disappear. Our bones might become part of the next species' foundation, our inventions, their myths, our mistakes, their warnings. And in that strange, endless recycling, maybe the universe itself is conscious not through us, but through the stories it keeps retelling. What if creation and extinction are its heartbeat, each rise and fall a breath in cosmic time? If that's true, then we're not the last civilization, nor the first, just one voice in an eternal chorus, singing our verse before fading into the next. But while we're still here, breathing, building, dreaming, we have the power to choose what kind of memory we leave behind, whether we vanish as another cautionary tale, or as proof that even in the face of oblivion, something inside us reached for the light. Because maybe the universe isn't testing our intelligence, but our wisdom, our ability to coexist, to sustain, to understand that survival is not conquest, but harmony. And perhaps that's the final test every civilization faces. Not how high it can rise, but how gently it can stay. So if we truly are the last, then let our legacy be compassion, not consumption. Connection, not control. Let our cities hum not with fear, but with purpose. Let the next beings who find our traces see not only our destruction, but our wonder, the art we made, the love we gave, the awe we felt standing beneath the same endless sky they will one day inherit. Because in the end, civilizations may crumble, species may vanish, and worlds may fade, but the desire to create, to explore, to mean something that perhaps is eternal. And maybe long after we are gone, when the sun has dimmed and the continents have drifted into unfamiliar shapes, the memory of humanity will still shimmer faintly across the universe, carried by the remnants of our light. Perhaps distant travelers, made of something we can't yet comprehend, will trace faint radio signals, the last whispers of our voices echoing across interstellar dust, fragments of our music, our laughter, our prayers, blending into the hum of the cosmos. They might never know who we were, but they'll sense intent, the raw emotion encoded in the static of time, proof that once, something fragile yet magnificent tried to understand existence. Maybe they'll wonder how a species so aware of its mortality dared to imagine eternity, how we painted galaxies on cave walls before we even knew what stars were, how we dreamed of immortality knowing our hearts would stop. And perhaps that's what makes us remarkable. Not that we lived forever, but that we loved as if we would. Because to be human is to live with the unbearable awareness of ending and still, to create symphonies, to raise children, To plant trees we'll never sit beneath. Maybe that is civilization's truest measure, not its towers or its technology, but its tenderness, its willingness to nurture something that will outlive it. And if one day another intelligent species rises from the dust, they might not find our monuments intact, but they may feel our warmth in the soil, our story in the elements, our fingerprints on the laws of physics we once tried to decipher. They might learn from the radiation that still lingers, from the fossils of our machines, from the patterns in the atmosphere, and in studying our fall, they might secure their survival. Maybe our extinction is not failure, but contribution, a necessary sacrifice in the long experiment of life. For every civilization that comes after will be a reflection of those before, carrying fragments of memory and instinct across time. And if consciousness truly evolves, perhaps what we call the end is only a transformation. One civilization dissolving so another can emerge, wiser and more attuned to the harmony of creation. So what if we are the last? What if our duty isn't to prevent the end, but to end beautifully with awareness, gratitude, and humility, ensuring that whatever follows begins from a place of learning, not loss? Because maybe the universe isn't cruel in erasing civilizations. Maybe it's patient, refining existence until it understands itself. And if our story is part of that process, then we were never meaningless. We were the breath before the next awakening, the silence before the next song. And perhaps somewhere far ahead, when another being stares up at their night sky and feels the same pull we once did, the same mix of fear and wonder, a faint resonance of who we were will stir in their heart, guiding them toward what we always sought. Not dominance, not permanence, but truth. And in that truth lies something deeper than progress. A quiet realization that maybe civilization was never about cities or machines or empires, but about consciousness learning to recognize itself in every form. From the smallest cell to the grandest galaxy, we've spent millennia reaching outward, searching the stars for answers. But perhaps the real discovery has always been inward understanding that the same energy that lights up the cosmos burns within us. What if we were never meant to conquer the universe, but to become aware of our place in it, to see that every rise and fall, every birth and extinction is part of a vast rhythm of renewal? Imagine if all the civilizations before us, those that might have existed and vanished long before our time, weren't failures, but chapters in a story too big for one species to finish. Maybe each left behind pieces of wisdom, embedded in the fabric of space itself. Lessons we unconsciously carry forward through intuition, inspiration, and the mysterious pull of destiny. And maybe when we dream, we are remembering them, the lost worlds, the forgotten thinkers, the ancient hopes carried through the universe like dust. Perhaps the next civilization, the one that rises after us, will inherit that same spark, that same hunger for meaning, and they too will look to the sky and wonder who came before. They'll study the silent ruins of our cities, decode fragments of our languages, feel the emotions captured in our art, and understand us not as gods, not as monsters, but as beings trying desperately to make sense of infinity with limited time. And maybe they'll forgive us for the greed, the wars, the blindness, because they'll see that we were learning, just as they will one day struggle and stumble in their own search for balance. Perhaps they'll continue the work we started, healing the planet, harmonizing with nature, creating technology that sustains rather than destroys. And if they succeed, then in a way we will have succeeded too, because the light of one civilization always seeds the dawn of another. But what if there are no more after us? What if this is the final act, the last breath of conscious life before the universe grows cold? Then let it be a graceful ending. Let the earth remember us not for the noise we made, but for the beauty we left, the music that still vibrates through water and air, the architecture that mirrors celestial geometry, the compassion that moved us to help one another even when everything else fell apart. Let the stars hold our essence in their glow, carrying our story forward as energy transformed but never destroyed. Because maybe that's the secret, that nothing truly ends. Every civilization that falls becomes the soil from which something new grows, and in that way, existence continues eternally, even if the faces and forms change. So if we are the last, let us live as though we are also the first, with wonder, reverence, and the courage to cherish what remains. Let us remember that our greatest creation isn't our technology or our art, but our capacity to care, to feel deeply, to see ourselves in others, to choose meaning over apathy, even when the universe seems indifferent. And if someday, long after our sun has burned out, another being somewhere far away feels that same ache, that same quiet yearning for purpose, then maybe that's us, still echoing through eternity, reminding creation that we were here, that we loved, that we mattered. And as the echoes of our existence ripple outward, carried by photons, drifting through nebulae and dust clouds, maybe the universe itself listens, absorbing the essence of everything we were, our mistakes, our hopes, our art, our prayers, and reshaping them into something new. Because even if humanity fades, energy never truly disappears. It changes form, merges with something greater. Perhaps our thoughts, our emotions, our dreams, all the unseen frequencies of consciousness, are not lost but recycled, woven into the next iteration of life that blooms somewhere beyond our reach. Maybe the atoms in our bodies will one day form the veins of a new creature, one that looks to its sky and feels the same unexplainable pull toward meaning that we once felt. What if this cycle of rise, fall, rebirth is not tragedy, but design? The universe perfecting awareness through endless transformation, using civilizations as mirrors to see itself more clearly each time. And what if the end of humanity isn't a failure, but a return, a dissolving of ego, a merging with the source that birthed all creation? We imagine endings as silence, but perhaps the silence is only a pause before another beginning. Our cities might crumble, our satellites fall, our names vanish from memory, but somewhere deep in the quantum hum of existence, the vibration of who we were will persist, subtle but eternal. It will travel through time like a whisper of consciousness, carried in light, in gravity, in rhythm, waiting to awaken again. And maybe when it does, it will awaken wiser. Maybe it will remember not our destruction, but our striving, our curiosity, our ability to create beauty even in decay. Because that's what defines a civilization, not its dominance, but its devotion to meaning. We've built machines that can think, rockets that can leave our planet, networks that connect billions. Yet our greatest achievement has always been the heart that feels, the mind that wonders, the soul that refuses to give up hope. And if one day, long after our time, another intelligence arises, whether on Earth or in some distant world, they'll inherit that same spark, that same divine longing to create and understand. Maybe they'll call it something else. Maybe they won't even have words, but they'll feel it, that pulse of awareness, that sacred urge to reach beyond themselves. And when they do, when they look at the ruins of our world or sense the faint hum of our energy in the cosmic background, they'll know we existed. They'll know that once, fragile beings made of dust looked into the infinite and dared to imagine eternity. And in that moment, our story will continue not as a memory, but as a resonance, woven forever into the living fabric of the cosmos. And perhaps that resonance will guide them not as a warning, but as a map, a faint trail of light through the vast unknown, showing what we learned and what we lost. Maybe they will sense that we too were seekers, explorers who built from nothing, who questioned the stars and ourselves, who fell often but kept reaching. They might not know our languages, our nations, our names, but they will feel the emotion that drove every invention and every act of creation, the hunger to understand why we exist at all. Perhaps they will see our extinction not as an end, but as a passing of the torch, an inevitable transition written into the structure of existence itself. Because life, in all its infinite forms, seems to crave awareness. It climbs toward consciousness, like plants toward light, evolving again and again, refusing to give up. And what if that not survival is the point? What if the universe doesn't care which species endures, only that something somewhere keeps awakening? Then our role was never to be eternal, but to be part of that awakening, a brief yet brilliant flare of understanding in an endless sea of darkness. Maybe that's why we love, why we build, why we imagine, because deep down we remember that we are the universe, trying to remember itself. And even if we vanish, that remembering continues. The atoms in our bones will scatter into the air, into water, into stars yet to form. The energy of our thoughts will drift through space, becoming the seeds of future dreams. Every heartbeat, every word, every act of kindness will echo not metaphorically but physically, as vibrations through time. The cosmos doesn't forget. It recycles memory as matter, emotion as motion. Somewhere, billions of years from now, a new civilization may feel a sudden sense of déjà vu when they first discover fire or music or love. Because it's not new, it's us returning in another form, carrying the same essence forward. So maybe we are the last civilization on Earth, but never the last in existence. Maybe the story continues elsewhere, among beings born from the dust of our ruins, under skies lit by unfamiliar stars. And if we could watch them, we might recognize something familiar in their eyes, wonder, fear, longing, the same emotions that defined us. We might see them build, fall, rebuild, and we'd understand that the pattern was never punishment, but purpose. The universe learning to balance creation with compassion, power with humility. And in that understanding, perhaps we'd finally feel peace knowing that nothing we did was wasted, that even our failures became the soil for something wiser to grow. Because every civilization, no matter how advanced, carries within it the same question: how to live without forgetting what made it alive. Maybe that's the real test, the one we were always meant to face, not whether we can survive forever, but whether we can live meaningfully for as long as we're given. And if we did that, if we loved, created, and sought truth with sincerity, then even if humanity fades, we will have fulfilled our purpose. The light that once shone through our eyes will scatter across eternity, becoming part of everything that ever was and everything still to come.